Mr. Herz.
Thank you. I have a prepared speech to deliver to you all today, and I don't normally prepare my speeches, but this will be the last time I speak. Yesterday was a big day for me. I met with the mayor, city manager, city attorney, and Tony Brown to discuss various matters relating to the low-income housing problem in this city. At approximately 12 p.m., I spoke with Stanley Lowe, GHA's executive director, about his trip to Washington and his conversations with HUD, which he said, well, not really in. At approximately 12:30 p.m., I looked at a letter from MBS, which had a breakdown, that's from McCormick, Barron, Salazar, for 248 new mixed-income housing in the city, which I had never seen before, never contemplated. At approximately 1 p.m., I read an email from Tony Brown enclosing a packet from GHA's Washington attorney regarding a proposal that had been filed by Mr. Lowe with HUD on Wednesday, August 15th, discussing an additional 248 mixed-income units to be constructed behind Randall's, which was filed without the knowledge of any member of the GHA Board of Commissioners. I'll tell you later. But later in the afternoon, I received an email which indicated that GLO had cut off funds to Galveston. 10 days before the deadline imposed by HUD and GLO, and 41 days before the deadline stated to me by Jorge Ramirez, a GLO negotiator, that a plan had to be agreed upon by the GLO and the city no later than September 30th. Mr. Ramirez's comment to me was made at approximately 9 p.m. on August 15th while I was in my office working on my column for last Sunday's paper. The same date that Mr. Lowe's proposal for an additional 248 units was filed with HUD. Isn't it amazing that the GLO and HUD have no earthly idea what's happening? Mr. Ramirez's comment was also made to the mayor on the same date prior to my conversation with Mr. Ramirez. But then he even misspoke about the September 1st deadline for submitting a plan, since the GLO took action on August 22nd. But who's saying somebody's a liar? Not me. GHA for advice about the various problems. And her advice was that she thought HUD was setting up GHA for a takeover based upon whatever plan GHA submitted, unless it corresponded to whatever HUD wanted, which I had no idea. GLO was supposed to be negotiating for HUD, but they're undercutting each other, as you'll see later. Let me summarize my past 48 days as chairman. On July 23rd, the mayor and I and others met with the secretary and numerous assistant secretaries and deputy secretaries in Washington. The secretary suggested to us very strongly that GHA do away with the moratorium that it put in place for the new commissioners to do their due diligence, that GHA begin work on the mixed income housing, that McCormick, Barron, and Salazar was a very good firm to do the work, surprise, and that the city and GHA negotiate in the future with the GLO, as the GLO had a plan for low-income housing in Galveston. The only part of the instructions that surprised me were C and D. Why was McCormick, Barron, Salazar even discussed by a government official? And why were we told to negotiate with the GLO? The mayor, city attorney, city manager, Ann Maisel, and Stanley Lowe met with two representatives of the GLO. That time, the GLO stated they were in charge of the plan, not HUD, and GHA had to build 141 low-income housing units on Magnolia and Cedar Terrace, plus such additional mixed-income units that could be built with the amount of money the GLO specified. $35 million plus $1.1 million that GHA, when I asked where it was coming from, they didn't know, plus insurance funds remaining, and disputed GHA's claim that that money had been reduced to $9.7 million. The GLO stated they did not like tax credit financing, and they could care less about mixed income unless there was money available through the insurance funds. GLO also stated that 388 scattered sites had to be built, 288 on the island and 100 on the mainland, with project-based vouchers provided by HUD for the tenants. I laughed and asked them how they planned to build 100 on the mainland. And they said they would take the responsibility for convincing the county judge, and if he didn't agree, they had the power to do it on their own. The GLO said the scattered sites would be built by a nonprofit and owned and operated by a nonprofit with a lease-to-buy program to be set up. They also said the scattered sites would only involve dilapidated or run-down property, and new construction built to floodplain levels would be employed unless the property could be rehabbed, which they considered highly doubtful. At a later meeting, they said all buildings would be green, built to ADA standards with elevators, although they were trying to get the elevators away. The mayor told them 208 scattered sites were too many, and I am being calm about that comment. At a meeting with Tony Brown and I, after our original meeting, I took him across the street to meet Tony. They asked why Stanley Lowe was present for our meeting. They did not appreciate his presence because they wanted the meetings to be confidential until plans were worked out with the city and the low-income advocates. There is no love lost between GLO and Stanley Lowe. Maybe now they're in love, who knows. At a later meeting, I argued for additional credit against the 569 units should the mixed income units have more than 50% low income. For instance, if one became 90% low income 2 years after construction, an additional 40% should be credited against the 569. The GLO refused. I also requested that some requirements be put in to make certain that the 40% market rate units actually be rented at market rates without subsidies for low-income families. The GLO refused. So their mixed income, as I'll tell you later, in name only. I stated to them that how could units be termed mixed income if they were substantially low income, and their argument was that was up to HUD, and besides they didn't care about the mixed income anyway. The GLO also stated that they had never approved the previous plan submitted to HUD, although neither the prior board of GHA or MBS, which filed the plans with the city for approval, ever disclosed this fact. Although the GLO did not specifically recommend MBS, they suggested that we meet with MBS because GHA had spent a hell of a lot of money with them during the last X number of months, and it might be cheaper. GLO also asked us to ask MBS how many total units they could build for the money available, $36.1 million plus insurance funds. For your information, to see how things, it was hard, and the mayor will tell you how it was hard to get things under control. Stanley Lowe told me on at least 4 or 5 occasions, and at the meeting with MBS specifically, that he had spoken with several people at HUD, and they would never approve the scattered sites requiring HUD to provide project-based vouchers to a third-party owner of the scattered sites. Now, this is why GLO is telling us they control everything. He stated that GLO must be working with the grants section of HUD, and public and Indian housing would put a stop to it. Mr. Lowe said one of the HUD contacts said that the GLO's plan was a fantasy. That's where I got the word fantasy in my column. On August 6th, Ann Maisel and I met with MBS representatives and Stanley Lowe. I believe Robert Bastine was also there. I handed MBS a copy of this letter. It provided for answers to my questions within 10 days, but the meeting was on such a professional level that I told them that 10 days wasn't an absolute, but please answer it in due course. That was 17 days ago, and it hasn't been answered yet. The only correspondence I've received is their breakdown of costs for 248 additional units. Now, I won't go through all the questions I asked MBS, but let's start with, what guarantee will MBS provide that market rate units will be leased without any subsidy from a third party or MBS or any voucher of any type, and only to individuals who will pay market rates without subsidies or assistance of any type? The reason I ask this question, I've been told that one of the main purposes of HUD supporting mixed income housing is the deconcentration of poverty. If more than 141 units are rented to low income, can you explain to me how this deconcentrates poverty? Or are we just reverting to pretty public housing projects, i.e. pretty communities of the poor? Another question, if the GLO statement of the city and GHA representatives is correct, that the GLO did not approve the previous plan for 890 mixed income and project vouchers, why did the previous GHA board and/or MBS file the plans for Magnolia and Cedar Terrace with the city for approval prior to receipt of such GLO approval? Did GHA and MBS disclose to the city at that time that the previous plan for 890 mixed income and project vouchers had not been approved by the GLO? If your answer is no, please explain why. Now this is the one that they didn't want to explain. I am very familiar with construction management relating to large construction projects. One of my clients has done probably more than $500 million with one of the largest construction management firms in the United States, a firm which during its years of operation has provided services for billions of dollars of construction projects throughout the United States. I asked a representative of the firm what was a normal and customary fee, and it was substantially below the 10% provided in your contract with GHA. Now, I asked him what the fee was because I knew what their fee was in my contracts. I just wanted to see what the customary fee and see if they were charging my client more than the customary. He knew where I was coming from, and of course he wasn't. Your fee, according to the contract, could also be increased under certain conditions. In addition to your fee, the contract also provides for reimbursement of certain costs and expenses. In addition, is my understanding that you also intend to hire a general contractor. A general contractor may additionally charge high fees. It is certainly not uncommon to see fees of 10% profit plus an allowance for 10% overhead in a general contractor's contract. My question is simple. If your firm is acting as a developer and construction manager, why would you need to hire a general contractor? My experience with a construction manager is that for its fee, it bids out all of the major subcontracts, negotiates the bid and contracts, and oversees construction, thus saving the owner the 10% profit and 10% overhead. Now, I won't go into the other questions I asked him.
Did you get any answers?
No, I told you, it's been 17 days. I told him you don't have to answer in the 10 days, but it's been 17 days, and the only thing I've gotten from him is the pro forma for 248 additional units, which I got yesterday. To say I'm exasperated by the various positions of HUD and GLO is an understatement. It is hard to negotiate with a bouncing ball with both HUD and the GLO are undercutting each other's position. However, Mr. Lowe's proposal to HUD may have shocked me the most. No copy sent to the chairman of the board and no mention of it in our telephone call last Friday when I called him. And I just got an email from Mr. Lowe when I called him when we got the letter from HUD. And I said, what's up? And he didn't know. He said, I may have to go to Washington. Now, in his email, he says, I told you I was going to Washington. He didn't. He said, I may have to go to Washington. Regarding the receipt of the HUD deadline letter, this Monday afternoon after his meeting in Washington, or when he finally returned my Tuesday and Wednesday phone calls yesterday around noon, never mentioned this. I suppose he thinks when HUD takes over the GHA that his actions will guarantee him a position, unless a deal has already been cut. He needs to be terminated immediately, and I have told him that in my letter, in my email to him, in which I will more fully answer some of the BS in his email. Until I spoke with Sharon Strain yesterday afternoon, I was prepared to discuss with you and the GH board on Monday the possibility of constructing 141 low-income housing units on Magnolia and Cedar Terrace, which was part of the GLO plan. 100 mixed-income units on the mainland, which was part of the GLO plan. 175 project-based vouchers for apartments in Galveston. No more than 25% for any apartment project could receive the vouchers, so it wouldn't be like a HUD sandpiper, which was part of the old GHA plan that HUD approved. 85 units to be built for senior citizens, the disabled and infirm, and senior veterans getting priority, which was part of the original old GHA plan, but I'm not sure it was ever approved by HUD, and 28 scattered sites in Galveston to be subject to GHA and City Council decisions as to site selection, architectural design, city codes, etc. Unfortunately, you may wish to discuss it, but I don't believe GA should, since, as Ms. Strain suggested, GHA may be being set up for a takeover. But then, Council probably should discuss a plan. The problem in producing a plan is that vouchers are the best solution to deconcentrating poverty. The system is working in Galveston, but any system may have to be tweaked and improved. How? Well, should landlords have to prove housing that is better than the low state standard of decent, safe, and sanitary? And should tenants be held to a standard of being responsible for the proper maintenance of the property and upholding neighborhood standards? I won't go into details of why vouchers are the best means for deconcentrating poverty, but my column did, which includes letting people choose where they want to live, letting people live near work, stopping the isolation of the poor into communities of the poor, etc. But in my opinion, HUD, the GLO, and the low-income advocates and previous mayors and boards of GHA don't give a damn, haven't given a damn, as to what is best for the low-income families, disabled or elderly. They only care about numbers. And if it is necessary to confine these residents to communities of the poor because HUD refuses to put in place standards that would guarantee mixed income housing, and it's just too bad for the residents. 2 days ago, I met with a friend who happens to be a minority to talk about the housing problem. As I was leaving, he said to me that several people had mentioned to him that the mayor, Ann Maisel, and I were Jewish, and how could we be against helping black people? I was incensed that anti-Semitism had reared up because 3 people who happened to have the same religion believed that there was a better method for solving the problems of low-income housing. My people were released from the European ghetto beginning in the 1790s, and except for the years of the megalomaniac Hitler, we've enjoyed freedom from the ghetto. I've made the decision that I will never vote for any plan that returns low-income persons to the ghetto, whatever its name may be, including mixed-income housing, without standards or without changes. Mixed income is mixed only in name. I would absolutely support mixed income housing. And I will tell you that frankly, and maybe some of you will differ with me. If HUD would place restrictions on the market rate portion of the housing so that the properties could be leased to persons who could pay the market rates without discount or subsidy of any type, including vouchers of any type for that 40%. Otherwise, we are simply providing Ritz-Carlton ghettos for the poor, Four Seasons communities of the poor. Yesterday, Mr. Lowe told me that HUD refused to put any restrictions on the market rate portion of mixed income housing. Therefore, I cannot support any plan that returns low-income individuals to a ghetto. Because of Sharon Strain's admonition, I do not want to create a situation in which my vote would cause GHA to be taken over by HUD. I'm a volunteer. I'm not a politician, and I will not compromise my principles to hurt anyone. Nor will I bend my knee to 2 government entities and their political lackeys whose first allegiance is wielding power, not in doing what is best for the underclass. I've done my best for the city during these 48 days and GHA, in spite of HUD, and in spite of GLO, and in spite of them undercutting each other and undercutting the city. Bullies get their comeuppance eventually, and I can only hope that in this case it will be sooner rather than later. Life is too short to have to deal with political fools and political chicanery. I'm amazed that the GLO has permitted itself to be the tool of HUD, or if anyone at the GLO has read King Lear, that the GLO has played the fool to HUD. But both the GLO and HUD should hang their heads in shame for their actions of letting hard units in ghettos supersede the best interests of the low-income families, disabled, and seniors. I therefore am submitting my resignation as chairman of the GHA and as a commissioner. Mayor Rosen will have my resignation later this afternoon. I hope that I may continue to work with council, if you wish, to help secure the city adequate legal representation, if that becomes necessary. My time, of course, will be volunteer. Thank you.
I'll take a 5-minute break right now.